Welcome back to another episode of Investigating Innovation with the I2C. I'm your host, Madison Travis, and on today's episode, we're back with another Spark Spotlight. We're going to be sitting down with Jill from Deep Target and asking her about what the ideals of an entrepreneur really look like, and also what opportunities she's seeing in the industry right now. Let's roll. Hey, Jill, we're so excited to have you on our podcast today. How are you?
I'm great, Madison, and thank you for having me.
Of course. So, Jill, you're with Deep Target, one of our newer companies here at the I2C. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your company and just kind of what your almost like day-to-day looks like? Like, what is your professional background? Kind of give us the rundown, I guess.
Okay, no, that sounds perfect. So I'm Jill Homan. I'm president of Deep Target. And so a little about the journey. I'm an Alabama native. I attended and graduated from the University of Alabama in engineering and software engineering, and started my career as a software engineer. And this is way before your time, Madison, but it was with Intergraph Corporation.
Yep.
At the time, Intergraph was a Fortune 500 company. So while I was there, and that's the only large company I've ever worked for, but while I was there, one of my mentors was a lady who was breaking glass ceilings at the time and has continued to do that. And her name is Preetha Pulasani. So Preetha served as president of Intergraph Corporation, and I worked in one of her divisions when I was just fresh out of college, young engineer. So we spent some time together just in those roles, and then our paths separated because Madison, I knew I really wanted more than just the big company experience. So I went the route of internet startups, and this was you've probably read about it, but it's when there was so much money being thrown at internet-based companies, and it was just a very interesting time. But I went that way and became, someone who just really loved entrepreneurship and working with startups. And I even worked for one of the very first email marketing companies that was founded by a group of executives in the Huntsville area. And then later I worked for another tech company where we had a focus on retail and financial services. So all the while I was kind of building my experience background, if you will, not knowing it, but preparing for Deep Target, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Well, and so eventually, Preetha went her own way as well. And she eventually left Intergraph and ran a print on demand company. And she also, ironically, was dabbling in fintech, financial services technology. So, as the story goes, we came back together. I had exited one of the companies I was working with, one of the small companies, and we got back together in 2016 to really build out and grow Deep Target. So it's been fun. And I guess the thing you asked to kind of day to day, Deep Target. I can tell you a little bit about Deep Target and what it does, or what we do, if you're interested in.
Of course.
Yeah. Well, so Deep Target is a digital experience platform, and that's kind of a new term, Madison. Mm-hmm. But basically, what that is it's marketing and engagement, leaning more on the engagement side, right? Replicating the human experience online. And we do that specifically for banks and credit unions. So one of the things that we've done is we've developed this platform and we use innovative engagement methods. And in fact, in 2020, we introduced something that we call smart, socially inspired stories for financial services. So Madison, Instagram, right?
Just a little bit, right?
Instagram stories, and they've also been adopted by like WhatsApp and Facebook and everywhere. So that we do that in a very smart way inside of digital banking platforms.
Oh, awesome.
So if you as Madison log into digital banking, and if your credit union or a bank or one of the Deep Target customers, you would see something, whether it was a button, a pull down, or even a banner that's in your journey as you're doing your banking that would say Madison's financial story. When you summon that story by touching it, right, what would come up is something very similar to Instagram stories, only it's powered by Madison's financial profile. Secured information that your bank knows about you and uses in a trusted and very responsible way. Because keep in mind, you're logged into their secure environment. So what we're seeing with that, and we power that by predictive analytics and artificial intelligence and a lot of fun stuff for the bank and the credit unions. But what we're seeing is that type of engagement drives tremendous results. Right. And so the bank or the credit union is using that to engage people like you, Madison, people like me. So I'm assuming you're a Gen Z or a millennial.
Yes.
People like me, who's a Gen X, or people, we have amazing stories about traditionalists, people that are in that 65, 70, 75-ish age range that enjoy something that's engaging, something that's fun. And so they love these stories with products, like you might be interested in, your first home, right? You might be interested in your own credit card and establishing credit. So it's products for you that would make sense for like your lifestyle and time. But it's also things you may not even know about, you need to be taking advantage of it with your bank. Okay. So loyalty programs, financial wellness stuff, that became huge last year, right? Learning about your mortgage, learning about how do I save? What do I need to be doing? And even another thing is even like community information. So we give banks and credit unions a way to treat Madison like an individual online. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, and that's it's interesting that you guys decided to pursue something like this, kind of without knowing that a year like 2020 was going to exist, where engagement online, no matter the platform, is so essential. It was a time where we couldn't really all be together. So those engagements, regardless of kind of what information it is or necessarily like who you're engaging with, it felt so just beneficial, like mutually even, to have that engagement online. And that's so interesting. I haven't heard of something like this. So this is super cool to talk about. Well, how long have you been working on this idea? I know that you said like all your professional experience was kind of priming you for this without you knowing, but how long have you been working on this idea, and what did that process really look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I mentioned Preetha. Preetha had acquired the foundational technology for smart engagements. And so phase one wasn't stories, right?
Right.
Phase one was doing very smart and very dynamic, multimedia rich, or just simple flat banners within the journey of the banker, right? So that's and this platform that I'm talking about has a whole lot of capabilities that makes that very smart, and it measures how people are interacting with those communications. And so future communications get smarter. So the genesis of what Preetha acquired years ago, and so we're going to rewind the clock to 2009, was a technology that we've now taken and expanded. So Preetha was quite visionary, as most engagements back in the early 2000s and even the latter 2000s were not unique, and they were not at scale. So you had a lot of things that they didn't know you were Madison, but it was like, oh, Madison, how about a home improvement loan, right?
Right. Yeah.
And you're going, well, I don't even have a home. I'm not a homeowner yet, but okay. So it's mismatched things that, they honestly serve to have the opposite effect, right? If you're not using Madison's data, it's like, well, you don't even know who I am.
Exactly.
So, Rita was quite visionary because she saw that it was very manual. So she set aside Deep Target, put it into its own company in 2009, and really kind of became a student of it and what was going on. Preetha has always had a fantastic marketing head. And so as time progressed, she had a sense that the tech she had could be pretty special. And this is where I came in. I had exited a company back in the latter part of 2015. And she asked me, I was doing some consulting, and she asked me to come and just look at this company. And Madison, I had no intention of doing anything full time.
Right.
But when I dug into it, I said, oh, this is something that could really have some legs, right?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I joined her full time in 2017 to really evolve the platform and take it to the market in a bigger way. And today we support over 200 banks and credit unions with these types of smart engagements at scale.
How awesome. What a story. I love the rekindling factor that you guys have throughout that process. And how interesting that she saw a problem and really aimed to solve it. I think a lot of consumers and really just people using digital platforms, kind of years ago did experience that and got very frustrated with their online engagement, just the usability really of it all. And really struggling because none of it really seemed to apply to them. And even now, sometimes even if you're scrolling on like Facebook or Instagram now, if you're scrolling and see an ad that literally makes no sense as to why it would be on there, you get kind of a little weirded out. You're like, where did this come from? But also you're just kind of frustrated because obviously that they're using data in some way. So how does this apply to me? So it's super interesting that you guys are really taking that and doing a lot with it in a very unique way.
And what you just said, I tell the story a lot, right? To try to get these banks and credit unions, and keep in mind they're on all. One of the things our platform does is really a continuum, Madison, where these banks and credit unions can start where they are and begin seeing benefit. Mm-hmm. And so many of them are in like a very early stage of understanding, gosh, how can I do this and do it better? So we serve credit unions that are small and banks that are small, say, 100 million in assets. Right. That's small in terms of a financial institution. And then we serve over 20 financial institutions that are managing assets in the range of $1 billion to $5 billion. Yeah. So the platform really extends itself to that. But you're right. That is one of the education points we talk to bank or credit union. And I tell the story about often externally, and this is what I mean by we do it smarter, and we measure it, and we tell them how things are working, and so the engagements get better. But what you were describing externally, I had personally experienced and become so annoyed by it, right?
Yeah.
And what would happen is it would be, so my son plays college baseball for UNA, right? And so one of the things that we had done, a lot of the kids over there will get houses, right? And so we had bought a couple of mattresses for his house. And so I'd already done it, right?
Right.
Well, the story, that I tell these banks and credit unions that we do not want to be, right, is I've already purchased the mattress, right? That is over and done. Well, I tell you, for at least 6 weeks, everywhere I went on my social channels, reading the Wall Street Journal, I was the mattress lady, right? Because I had researched it and I'd done it online. Well, now all these mattresses are following me, and I had the same thoughts you did, right? Is I've already purchased the mattress. In fact, the last thing I need right now is a mattress.
You're like, leave me alone, please.
Yeah, exactly. And so we talk about those things because that's not how you do it. We also educate the banks and credit unions that what you have is a very trusted environment.
Yeah.
If you do things like that, if you do creepy things, like with part of my personal information, it's not going to work.
No.
But if you can match my needs to products and services that you have that are going to save me money, gosh, I need that. I don't even know what that is, right? And so from the standpoint of getting my wallet share, from the standpoint of getting my mind share, so that I'm saving, and even from the standpoint of getting me involved in the community, our banks and credit unions have a tremendous opportunity. Think about it. When you go to a baseball game, and you look at the signs on the Little League field of the people that are supporting the community, you often find the banks and the credit unions right there, right?
Yep.
So they got a tremendous opportunity to engage us, and it's not just geographically bound,
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm even sitting here thinking about me, being, obviously I have a credit union that I use, and how much I would really love to sit, log on and see information that is tailored to me because as a college student, a lot of that information, regarding finances. Is very just uncertain. It can one become very convoluted online. If you start researching, you're getting a million different pieces of advice that all contradict each other, and just things that one you don't know if they apply to you. Two, you are not sure if you really want to pursue that right now. And all these different avenues. So something really tailored to you, especially regarding finances, like you said, it's a very trusted environment, can just mean so much and have such an impact on your relationship with that bank, and with that credit union in particular.
And this is 2020, it just magnified this as well. Three is, how do you know that you can trust that stuff you're researching
Right.
online, right? And so fraud is huge and it's heavy on so many individuals' minds. So to me, I think the banks and the credit unions have a unique opportunity to come in and say, hey, Madison, I've got your best interests at heart. And look, here's Madison's story. And then so engage with you the way you like to do it so that, you know what? Yes, that story is very tailored for those types of things that we're talking about. But, the deciding factor is your finger, right? So you're swiping left and right, and you swipe up to take advantage of the offer of the, and it's also awareness and escort stuff. So like, say you've opened a new account, and it is things like what you're talking about. I really know I've got the sense I need to learn. I need to be doing certain things. Well, your bank or your credit union is uniquely suited to identify those things that you don't even know about. So, it may be webinar training sessions where it's those kinds of things. I call them things that I'm going to do when I get enough time, right? And that never happens. So if you can get Madison's attention at point of engagement, I call it a welcome disruption, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where you can simply be swiping through with your finger and it's like, hey, Madison, you want this student loan debt payoff webinar? We got some really great tips and tricks for you. You swipe up, you sign up, because I can't tell you how many times I'll make a mental note, or worse, I'll write it on my pad. I still take notes on a paper and pad, right? and those are the things that fall off because it's like, oh, I'll get to that later. So that's the kind of thing we're trying to do, is reduce that friction and make you be more of, a satisfied member, a productive member if you're a credit union, or a satisfied consumer, a productive consumer of the bank.
Yeah. And me being a marketing major, of course, like I really recognize that call to action and how important the engagement is because like you said, people writing.
Oh, we never get there.
Right. That's what it's just going to stay right there on that piece of paper and I'm never going to do anything with it. But yeah, that call to action is so important. And it's such a good thing for companies to invest in. It is really getting that turnover in a good way and really just engaging your customers that you have, especially after a year like 2020. So, kind of with that being said, now that 2020 is kind of behind us, what opportunities are you seeing in your industry right now, especially here in Huntsville?
Oh, yeah. So 2020 put a big magnifying glass on the things we're talking about, right? On the need to treat customers uniquely and the need to do that at scale. So what I mean by that is you don't need to just be doing this one time. There's 100,000 Madisons out there, right? Depending on the size of the bank, right? And then we're unique. So it's a different conversation with Madison than it is with Jill. So that 2020 put a big magnifying glass on that. So many digital services that banks and credit unions and all businesses really had been procrastinating about were suddenly the center target. So fintechs like the Target, as you picked up on, we've benefited from this. So for us, 2020 brought recognition of value and the necessity of technology and of things like predictive analytics and behavioral metrics. Huntsville is interesting, right? I love Huntsville. And Huntsville has been, kind of a little bit isolated from, or insulated is probably the better word, from some of the, because we are such a heavy tech, right, area. We've been a bit insulated, but I can't say that pervasively because good grief, Madison, so many of our families have been really impacted and are struggling.
Right.
So that's something that I'm optimistic that we're going to start seeing a recovery from. But in Huntsville, if the company has an online presence or they've developed one, right, and many have, if they didn't have it and had to fill some of these gaps, the market is really transforming and accelerating for things like that. So, that's something that we're terribly optimistic about.
Awesome. Yeah. And Huntsville, just in general, outside of just your market, is growing so rapidly and provides so many opportunities. And I truly believe that one of the reasons that Huntsville grows the way that it does, especially right now, is because there's such a just collaboration amongst the companies that are here in Huntsville, and just a desire to see those companies succeed. And especially with your type of company and your type of industry, there, like you said, we're very tech heavy. So thankfully, we weren't extremely affected as a whole, but obviously individuals definitely felt the burden of that. And you guys have just an amazing opportunity to step in and really just provide that insight that a lot of those banks and credit unions are needing right now, to reconcile those relationships and really get people satisfied with their overall experience and feel confident in their finances again. It's something that's obviously very hard to achieve, but I think that your platform specifically provides a lot of leverage for those companies to actually act upon that, and see those opportunities through. So, kind of like I mentioned, the collaboration aspect of Huntsville, entrepreneurship typically is going to require a pretty large support system, and a growing network, to say the least. So how has your network specifically assisted you throughout your career? Like, have you had any specific connections that have truly impacted your business?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question for sure, right? So having a network provides support, right? And really helps for things like sales and partnerships, and probably most important, education, advice, and validation for different things. We talked a little bit about the process of growing a company, but for different things like right timing for capital and operations,
Right.
and creative resourcing, and all the things that one must go through when you're building out a company. But for me personally, connections have been so important, both providing these things and then also providing like credibility witnesses for our company, and solid references as we grow. And I'll tell you, Madison, for me, early on, I was able to connect with an Atlanta-based group of CEOs and presidents. And that was so cool. I mean, this was people that donated their time to come alongside people like me, right? To share experiences, share advice, to really serve as like a mentor. And that type of thing totally motivated and encouraged me. And I still talk with some of those people for advice, and just as we continue on in this journey. So I don't think you say enough about tapping those types of resources, and then also being those types of resources, right? I try to do that as well for others. And that always will be a mission. Preetha and I have talked about that, long after Deep Target, we see ourselves as doing that, especially for young women, right? Mm-hmm. That are, in the technology field, and just helping to grow that confidence. And, because that's something that we're seeing encouraging changes around, right? Is we're a small company. We have 8 women technologists, that work for us in our company of 17.
Right.
So, that's something that's near and dear to our heart, and just both being a consumer of what you're talking about, a network, and people that can collaborate with us and help us, as well as providing that. I can't say enough about the importance.
And I think that a lot of women entrepreneurs really do feel that way, because for a long time, I do think it's changing, but for a long time that, women entrepreneurs like yourself were definitely in the minority, and not seen as extremely credible or something that was going to be successful in the long run. And I've loved to see that transformation and that shift in the industry, and all these women really breaking through. And it's just really motivating to people like myself who are about to, enter into the professional realm, and see all of these professional women really pursuing their goals and offering so much advice to those around them. It's really reassuring, but also just gives me a lot of confidence as a woman entering the workforce. So, I know you said that you weren't planning to kind of do anything full time as an entrepreneur per se, but now that you are one and you've kind of had a couple of years of experience, what is your greatest strength as an entrepreneur?
Yeah, that's another good question. And I've been asked that before, and I think for me, it's creativity
Hmm.
and it's not giving up. So one of the things that I tell my employees, and this is funny because I've always told my kids this growing up, is I know there are plenty of reasons why it cannot work. I don't need you to tell me that, right?
Right.
But it's that ability to look for the ways that things can be done. Right. And so, that's what I refer to when I say creativity, and kind of that tenacity of, if we really, study this, if we really get creative, we can figure out, the ways that things can be done. So I think, for me, that has been a particular strength, is that, work ethic, do your homework, don't give up, put the time in, and don't be afraid to be creative.
Right. So now, okay, I have to ask. Obviously, this one's not a fun one, but what is your greatest weakness as an entrepreneur? I mean, obviously, there are a lot of challenges that come with it, and a lot of things to face. But specifically, what would you say is your greatest weakness?
That's one, that's something that I try to stay on top of. And look, I have a lot of weaknesses, right? The greatest weakness for me, I think, is sometimes not taking the time to step back from all the daily details of a startup and assess the big picture to make the most timely decisions. So in a startup, Madison, like what we have, you have to be very, very careful not to lose perspective when you're so heads down on a mission.
Right.
And for us, we're 17 people, right? And some fractional and some full time. And so we do a lot of different things, on a daily journey. There are so many different things that every person in the company is working on. So for me, sometimes that makes it difficult because I do wear so many hats, but that weakness, I think you got to just keep tackling that, because it's critical to look up and make the best and most timely decisions, right? And you can miss them if you get so caught up in the perspective of, okay, this is my mission and I'm doing this regardless of what's going on outside, right? What's happening in the industry, what's happening here, instead of that. And keep in mind, I'm an engineer by training, right? Which an engineer, so I have a computer science degree from the engineering school at Alabama, and that meant there was more heavy focus on electrical aspects of it as well. And so, but that means that gives you a little insight into my personality, right? That I'm organized and checklist driven, and and it's this and this and this and this, and so I have to be careful and attack that. That's a strength in some situations, but it can also be a weakness. And so that's just something. And I don't know. One of the things I try to encourage people to do as well is take those weaknesses and attack them, right? I mean, because if you can recognize it, then you can, you can honestly turn it around and use it for benefit.
Yeah, and it is so important to recognize them. Obviously, it's not fun. No one wants us to sit there and
Yes.
really analyze their weaknesses like that. But especially as an entrepreneur, whenever you sit down and recognize them in their full capacity, you're able to use them to benefit you, and really use them as an asset rather than something that's going to drag you down. And specifically with yours, I think that's a very common thing with entrepreneurs. I mean, you do have a mission that you're working on, and it's hard to really just step back from it for a minute. It becomes such a big part of who you are in your life in general that sometimes it can get overwhelming. And I'm sure you've worked with a lot of different people along your career, and I'm sure you've met with a lot of different entrepreneurs. But out of all the entrepreneurs that what is a common characteristic that you see throughout all of them?
That's a really good question too. Here's what I would say. I honestly don't think you're the smartest person in the room, but it is the fact that you have the willingness to do the extra mile stuff. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you know what? I'm going to do my homework. I am going to study this. I'm not going to wing it, right? I think the entrepreneurs that I've come across, it is that willingness to really have a passion, and then not just the passion singular, but have a willingness and ability to apply and do the homework, apply the energy and do the homework to support that passion, right? So it's and so what I'm trying to say there is it's a tremendous work ethic, right? So if you're thinking about being an entrepreneur, it's a tremendous work ethic, right? That goes along with that, but that it's the extra mile stuff that I think is the separator, because all of us can talk about, oh, we should do this and this, and wouldn't that be fun? And I tell you, when at the end of the day, it really doesn't happen with a whole lot of extra stuff that nobody ever sees,
Right,
and so
right.
that stuff that you got, that I think is the true separator when it comes to someone that's really particularly suited, to be creative, a risk taker, not have the fear, and just a willingness to live and breathe it, really.
Yeah. And that is so true. I mean, you do have to be willing to devote a lot of time, especially in the beginning. I mean, I think that changes kind of as time progresses, depending on the state of your, startup. But, there's a lot of just work that has to go into it. Maybe, and sometimes I feel like a lot of entrepreneurs are sitting there and they're working on something that they feel like doesn't even have to do with like what they really intended for what I'm saying? It's a lot of extra research and extra homework that sometimes feels so monotonous and so draining at times. But at the end of the day, that passion is what keeps you going. It is what makes you want to spend that extra time to do that. It's definitely something that's not for everyone. It's not your usual 9 to 5 and your lunch break in the middle of the day kind of thing.
Right.
But there's so many rewards that come with being an entrepreneur. And I love hearing stories like yours. And just seeing that kind of come full circle for a lot of people and really getting to hear their insight into what their journey has looked like. Obviously, everyone's is very, very different. But, I know you kind of touched on this a little bit, but what is one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's looking to start their own business?
Yeah. Madison, it would be preparation. So prepare before you pull the trigger, right? Or set sail.
Yep.
And so, I really believe you can't do enough, like research and your homework about what you're doing. You've already talked about another thing, connect with people who've been there. One of the most effective things that I've always found is sort of role play with yourself in that situation. And I'll tell you, I've done this at multiple points over in my career, and I've had opportunities to lead startups that, Madison, when I was say my children were 4 and 6, I said no to, right?
Yep.
Because I knew that it would take more sacrifice than I can give at that moment in time, right? And I don't think, one can say enough about, doing that. Connect with people who've been there, understand what does this really look like for me, right? And put yourself in that position. All right. And that's so I'm talking a little on the negative side, not really, because I think one is more suited for success when you have put yourself there. There's a saying that I've heard, I don't even know who to attribute this to, but it was, if you can't see it before you see it, you'll never see it, right? And so you got to have that vision, and it's got to be right time for you if you're going to be the leader of it. You got to know it will be difficult, right? I mean, so don't let if you connect with people who have been there, there's nobody going to say to you what you just said, right? It's 9 to 5, you'll get an hour lunch break. It's beautiful and kumbaya. But what you also said is, what I found personally is, it is the most rewarding experience when you see things happen that defy the odds. I've always been motivated, whether this is good or bad. This could have been the weakness thing, right? I've always been incredibly motivated by someone telling me something cannot be done.
Yeah.
Right. And so, when you start to see things happen that people tell you you cannot do, or, you shouldn't be able to do, you don't have enough money, you don't have enough experience, maybe you don't look the way that you should look. Right. So those things start happening. That's really cool. And so it can be incredibly rewarding. But once you go through that process, don't stay there. You can't keep looking back, and you can't keep reassessing. You got to make your decision and go for it. And so once you do, don't be afraid. Fear's the biggest, inhibitor there. And then again, look up and make timely decisions, as you're moving forward. So, that's been, just reflecting both on the times I've gone through that decisioning process and said no, or then eventually said yes. Those have been the things that have been influencers for me, and would probably be my advice.
Yeah. And, just like you said about being motivated by, people saying things can't be done. I think a lot of entrepreneurs feel that way. I think that's why a lot of them chose the role that they did. I think that's why a lot of them are pursuing a solution that a lot of people don't have a lot of faith in the beginning. It's always really interesting to hear that, because I think a lot of people can definitely relate to you on that aspect. There's a lot of work and preparation that goes into it, but if this is what you want to do, that's what you have to do to make it work. So, Jill, thank you so much for being on this episode, this Spark Spotlight, highlighting Deep Target today. It's so interesting to hear your guys' story. I'm extremely excited to see where this platform goes, and how it's really going to affect the Huntsville area. So thank you so much. And we're super excited to have Deep Target at the I2C.
Oh, absolutely. We're excited to be there. And thank you for the opportunity to have the conversation today.
And that concludes today's episode, you guys. I hope you enjoyed getting to hear more about Jill as an entrepreneur, but also Deep Target and what their industry and market is looking like right here in the Rocket City. Be on the lookout for who I'm going to interview next. In the meantime, make sure you're following us on all of our socials at UHI2C on Instagram and UH Invention Innovation Center on Facebook. Onward and upward.